All right, you guys, it's all hands on deck from now on, and welcome to the Online Prosperity Show. This is the number one place where you hear the real stories that are behind the people that are actually helping business owners solve problems that keep them up at night at 2 a.m. Kid you not. I'm your host, Prosper Taruvinga. And obviously, if you love what you do, but maybe marketing makes you want to maybe throw your laptop into the ocean, today's episode is going to make you feel like, the kind of therapy with the practical steps actually attached to it. So, I want you to buckle up. And as I've already started saying, all hands on deck, we're going to be talking about all of that as we get into the episode. Because today's guest actually helps business owners to stop sounding like everyone else online and actually start building authentic connections that actually convert into trust, clients, and growth. And trust me, I know you're going to want to share this episode with that one friend who keeps posting and nobody responds. But I want you to make sure that you are subscribed on whatever platform that you're watching this on, because we bring you exclusive conversations with people that are actually changing the way business is done. Now, today I'm really excited because we're joined by the incredible Alisa Cook, who is the founder of Ali Marketing Systems. Alisa, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. We connected on LinkedIn and we started chit chatting, and here we are today.
It's a
So
small
really
world, isn't
excited.
it? It's
Yep,
a
yep,
very small world, isn't it?
yep.
Absolutely. Now, for those that haven't had the privilege of connecting with Alisa on LinkedIn, well, let me save you the trouble of trying to figure out who she is and why you should care. Now, Alisa is a former school principal that has turned entrepreneur, and she actually discovered that marketing isn't really about marketing. It's about people feeling understood. And you know how she has been able to do that? It's because she has ghostwritten more than 50 entrepreneurial books and helped businesses and other solopreneurs to actually become multi-million dollar enterprises. And also, she's helped other multi-million dollar companies to build thriving communities around them, and businesses that are profitable and enjoyable. And I can't wait to hear how she has actually really, really influenced the entrepreneurial scene, because 50 books alone really can constitute all the books that are behind me there. And we will never know, because she's told me she's signed NDA. So we're going to just keep guessing. But I'll be asking her questions that would maybe prod her to let us know a little bit. So I will probably be milking those answers from her, as she can actually milk goats and make fresh cheese from that. So yeah, there you go. You didn't know that I knew that, Alisa, did you?
You must have read one of my essays about milking goats and making cheese in my
Uh,
former life.
Absolutely. So,
True story. True story.
yeah, if we're gonna be talking cheese and all the ingredients, I don't want you to mistake this episode as being a cooking show, but I want you to know that this is where we're actually going to be cooking the future that your business actually needs. And I really am excited for Alisa to be on the show today, because she comes in packing stories, metaphors, and everything else that will help your business actually become profitable and enjoyable. Now, Alicia, you're the one with the stories. I may just shut up from this point on. Tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got into marketing.
Well, first we have to talk about cooking, right? Because my last name is Cook. So I'm just saying. How I got into marketing, it's kind of a fun story. Like you said, my background actually originally was in education. I have a bachelor's and a master's degree in education. I started my PhD in education, but decided I didn't want to be a district supervisor. I wanted to work in the school. So I was primarily a principal. I was a high school principal. I was an elementary school principal. I also taught university level courses. And I was also in a couple assignments as special ed director, which is one of my passions. And so what happened is I was working, doing my thing, and the systems change. Wherever you are in the world, the governments change, and their control over education changes. That they're either going to nurture education or kind of handcuff us as educators, and that's what was happening. I felt handcuffed as an educator, where I didn't mind working 60, 70 hours a week because that was 60, 70 hours a week that I was connecting with the kids, with the teachers, with the parents, with the community, with the entire staff. But then it kind of turned into 60 to 70 hours of connecting with spreadsheets, attendance reports, test scores. And I didn't feel like I had time to really connect with the kids and the people who made school what it is. And so I retired. So I'm putting that in the air quotes. I retired. And of course, at the time I was living on that ranch where I was milking goats and I realized, I have that kind of brain that I like to be I don't want to say I like to be busy all the time because I definitely don't, but I like to be stimulated, mentally stimulated. And I said, I got to do something. I'm going to get bored otherwise. I mean, milking goats is great, but you can only sing milking goat songs, so many times before you realize you need to do something. So I decided, I'm a pretty good writer. I'm a pretty good editor. And this was way before, people did a lot of freelance. There weren't a lot of freelancing platforms. So when I started researching it, I found myself on the one and only that was really had a name for itself, and now everybody's heard of it, and that's Upwork. So I put myself out there on Upwork. I took any gig I could get, and ended up landing some writing and editing, jobs. And one client in particular, he was writing he was ghostwriting books for his clients, and they were all entrepreneurs. And they were wanting to get their ideas, their basically what we're doing here, get their stories down on paper so they could use it, to give them some more credibility, some visibility, in some ways a very, very thick, expensive business card. And through his work, that's when I started writing for entrepreneurs and worked with him for a few years, and did some stuff on my own, and ended up writing about 50 books in that kind of realm. And let me tell you, even though some of them said very similar things, like everybody, without exception, Prosper had a chapter of your why, like understand your why. But everybody had a different way of talking about it. So it always felt fresh to me. And then everybody had their own story. And when you're getting to know someone because you're ghostwriting their book, you're interviewing them, you're checking in with notes, you're asking questions, and you're realizing I can't think of one client that wasn't sincere. Like they were really interested in helping other entrepreneurs build their businesses and help them understand, hey, you're not in this alone. Being an entrepreneur is a lonely place sometimes, and they wanted to make sure that those people didn't feel alone. So through that process of getting to know them, you kind of fall in love with them. Like you kind of fall in love with their journey and their life and what they're bringing to the table. But what would happen is we would write these books and we would get them published, and some of them did really well, some of them did exactly what the person wanted. And then they would ask me, Alisa, how do I market these books? And I just intuitively knew, even though I hadn't done really any marketing, although I would argue that content writing and writing these books was very much marketing. Um, but I intuitively knew that you don't market the books, you market you. Because business is about connection, it's about relationships, or it shouldn't be transactional. And most of the entrepreneurs that I was writing for, that's exactly what their businesses were. So that's when I kind of started learning about marketing, and we started with real simple things. And I started, like a lot of marketers do, like, oh, I can do anything for you. And then I realized, what I'm really good at and what I really enjoy is helping entrepreneurs get into conversations with the right. That's what I enjoy. So
Absolutely.
that's where it started.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for opening us up to that, because from that alone, it just really gives us a point of reference as to the kind of person that you have become. I mean, you only just transferred the hallways that you're helping people, because in the education system, you were telling the kids to get out of the hallways, after school, right? And
Yeah.
go and do something with themselves. And literally now you just helping the entrepreneurs in the internet hallways. So we will sort of make that connection there a little bit earlier. But you did realize that obviously you had an understanding that the roles that you were undertaking in the education were not those which you wanted. Could you have intuitively known your why by then?
I think I knew my why always. When I decided we talked about pivoting before we went on recording, but we'll talk about it again, I'm sure.
Yep.
Before I went into education, I was actually in business, and I was 3 classes away from getting a business administration degree. And I decided, I didn't decide, I realized I didn't want to be a business person. I know there's irony to that. I know here I am, but I wanted to be an educator. So I always knew in my heart that I wanted to be an educator. Now, maybe I couldn't have articulated the why, but I think it was that in that environment that I was in, it was very corporate. And I realized that my role was to make money for that guy in the corner. Like that was my job, really. And that didn't resonate with me. What resonated with me was helping people and having a role where I was having a positive contribution in people's lives. And so I pivoted, literally pivoted from Chicago to Arizona to go to school to get my degree in education and ultimately my master's degree in education to kind of tap into that. So that would be the why of, work needed to be meaningful to me in a very human way. That's my why. That's what drives me. I love having conversations with people. I love connecting. I love helping people. I love being supportive. And that role isn't too much different from being a principal to doing what I do now. Because I can say, yeah, I do marketing, but most of my clients will tell you that part of that process is coaching, and it's a deep listening that I do, which is very very important when you're a principal, is to really listen and see and hear everything, and then reflect back what's going to help that person the most. And so, yeah, I certainly didn't have those words when I was 26 and I moved from Chicago to Arizona, but I certainly knew what was in my heart. I knew my why a long time ago.
Absolutely. Because the reason why I asked you that is you did mention every entrepreneur that was writing their book obviously had that section within their book and also whatever story that came along with it. And I kind of feel like we're writing yours right now as we
For sure.
as we progress. Now, with that being said, you went on, you did this part with the education system, and then, like you said, you retired and you got bored quickly. That's usually the ultimate reason why people actually go through work, so they can retire and not have to worry about anything. But you went on and did that, and it didn't feel like what you actually wanted to do. Could you maybe walk us through what was happening emotionally during this transition period? Because so many people wouldn't understand that you had won, you had arrived.
That's funny that you say that because years before, probably when I was about 40, I said, I want to be retired by the time I'm 50. I don't want to be working for anybody by the time I'm 50. That was my kind of fantasy and, a goal, I guess. And when you set goals like that, and you believe in them and you think you can get this done, you make little micro decisions that kind of move you in the right direction. That's why I think it's good to set goals. And so I made little micro decisions that kind of moved me in that direction. So when I left the school that I was working at, and I basically dedicated myself full time. I'm not kidding. I dedicated myself full time to, yes, milking the goats, taking care of the animals. We had horses, we had pigs, we had goats, we had chickens, we had dogs, and we had like a little kind of Airbnb business on our property. So that was my job, and I loved it. And I was walking up a hill on our property, and I realized, oh my God, I'm 50 and I'm not working for anybody. I reached my goal. Like it was just this epiphany that I had, like, oh my gosh, I did it. So I think what my goal really wasn't to retire. It was to not work for someone else. It was to work for myself. And so I didn't necessarily go back on my goal. I just realized, no, what I really meant was I enjoy work. I enjoy the work that I do, still do. And like I said, I like to be mentally, emotionally stimulated. I like to be around people. I like to talk to people. I just had to think differently. I didn't want to retire. I just didn't want to work for anybody else, which is, every entrepreneur's dream. And of course, we're our own worst bosses, right? But I can take.
Absolutely. And that sort of reframe is, I don't think a lot of people are exposed to that in their timeline because, when you arrived at that place where obviously you're working with animals, you're in nature, and it just seemed like that which you always wanted. The fact that you still saw that there was more inside of you, that's amazing. Now, I want to go to the part where obviously at that time, the internet was not really well known. And obviously, it wasn't a space that a lot of people would go into. Venturing into this whole Upwork and putting yourself out there, did that create some sort of fear that maybe this is not going to work or this is not going to be what it is cut out to be because maybe it wasn't proven at that time? And it wasn't that common. Or would you trust somebody who would just say, yeah, do me all the work and then I'll pay you later?
Well, that's a great question too. So I have to set the scene a little bit. When at the time that I went into Upwork and to do some new things, part of the goal was definitely money, right? Just to bring in a little bit extra money because you make decent money as a principal. It's hard work, but you make good money. And so part of the goal was to make extra money. And then part of the goal was my partner and I had kind of discussed, at some point, do we want to stay here on this ranch or do we want to be somewhere else? We had both grown up in pretty big cities, and we loved the ranch. We loved the open spaces, the very dark night skies. The silence was amazing, but we kind of missed the city vibe. And so we were talking about, retirement. Retirement comes up a lot in my conversations, as you can hear. And one of the things that we decided was, maybe at some point we should think about selling the ranch and moving. And we decided ultimately to spend half our year in Mexico, which is where we ended up moving about 7 or 8 years ago. But in that process came this thinking of, well, we're going to need some income if we're going to move out of the country. We don't have Social Security. We didn't have any like grand retirement fund or anything like that. So I need to make a little bit of money. And so that's when I did research, and that's when I found out about Upwork. And then what came out of that was really interesting. I have to again set the scene. In in our ranch we had the clawfoot bathtub, and that was the only place that I could sit comfortably to type and write. So I would sit in that bathtub and type and write. And like I said, I took any crazy awful gig I could take. And sometimes I was so tired and getting paid, a couple bucks an hour to type, to write, to edit. Like my eyes would be closing, but that was the most comfortable seat. I didn't have a desk. I didn't have anything set up. But part of the goal was I said, listen, I think I need to get to a point where I'm making about $2,000 a month doing this. And I said it might take a couple of years. And because that was our time frame, like maybe in 3 to 5 years. So I took any gig. Was there fear? Yes, because this was going to finance our future. This wasn't what we needed now. It's what we needed in the future to make this move. And I set that goal. There we go. I set that goal of 2,000 a month, thinking it would take a year or two. Because again, this was back in the day where freelancing wasn't. Fiverr was barely a blip. Fiverr was literally $5. You'd pay that was the price point. Like the 99-cent stores that are now all closed, it was like $5.
$5, yeah.
That's what was out there. And so I'm like, this is gonna take a while for me to get to 2,000. But within 6 months, 6 to 8 months, I was making 2,000 a month. And so yeah, I was fearful. But you just gotta push through, and you just have to believe in yourself and trust the process. And I'm still working with some of those people, either directly or indirectly. some of those people that I connected with way back when 10 years ago, I'm still in touch with, or I'm working with them, or they've referred me to someone. There's still that relationship.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, you've gone on, and obviously, you did mention, you're not at the liberty of disclosing what those books would be, but obviously, most books, like you said, end up really just sounding pretty much the same. There's that why, there's a story, and also the results that people get from the book. Some really do well, but some do what they're meant to be, which is maybe, like you said, some sort of a business card or something that expands the person's business and things of that nature. And obviously that's a story for another day, but you've written 50 of those, and that's commendable and incredible. I mean, the average American or Australian reads maybe one or two books a year, so that is a whole lifetime of books that somebody could actually engage in, and they still wouldn't have gotten to finish them all. Now, what is it that you actually started noticing about successful business owners that most people completely miss, especially those that did well when it came to their books and the work that you did with them?
That's a great question. I think, and it's the same thing, they all had a chapter on mindset, but I can't underemphasize that point, that mindset that you have to have. I'm going to do this, but you can't be dumb about it either. Like if something's not working, you have to take a look and take a step back, and not panic. There's a certain mindset to being an entrepreneur, to be a successful entrepreneur, especially. And that is perseverance. And the other point that came up often in these books was work-life balance. We're not getting into business to, a lot of times, like I said, I wanted to not work for someone else. That was part of my goal. But if I'm a slave driver and I'm working myself to the bone and I don't have time for my friends or my family or my animals or to take care of what I like to do, then I'm not a good boss. And so you have to find ways to build a business where you actually are getting what you wanted, which is freedom. That's why we go into business for ourselves, is freedom. But I see too many people, they get stuck in the hustle. They get stuck in the go, go, go. There's a lot of action, there's a lot of movement, but there's not a lot of productive action. Like I have it set up in my business that with just a little bit of preparation, with like a week's worth of preparation with my team, I can go away for a couple weeks and check in maybe once or twice. And that's about building those systems and trusting your team and having that mindset that the world's not going to end if I am offline for a couple weeks. And I did it recently. It was the first time I did it in 10 years, where we took a 5-week trip. We traveled all over the Western United States in a little camper van, hit a whole bunch of national parks, state parks, national wildlife places. And I think I worked like maybe 3 hours that whole time. I had to take a couple really important meetings. I had to take a couple calls that were really important and urgent that I really did need to be on. But because we had set up the systems before I left, it wasn't a big deal.
That is beautiful, and you're absolutely right. That is the whole reason why people go into business, so they can be free to do and have whatever it is that they want to do with whoever they want to do whenever they want to be able to do it. And I think congratulations to you for having sort of discovered that. And talking of discoveries, there's a statement that you mentioned that you don't market the book, you market you as the author. Now, I think that's something that really flips conventional thinking, because a lot of businesses, like you say, they're doing the whole hustle and they obviously, working on the business besides working on the business. Why do you think so many businesses still hide behind logos, hustle, instead of becoming visible themselves?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's some of it is not wanting to appear vulnerable, wanting to kind of wear the CEO, I'm powerful, strong kind of jacket. But I think what we know, and again, this, it depends on the business, but, most of the people that I work with are B2B consultants or coaches or service providers. And they're working with their clients for years sometimes. And that relationship has to be in place. And I have met some entrepreneurs who, on the surface, seem like they've got it dialed in, but when you talk to them, you realize A, they're working 80 hours a week, and B, like when AI came around, they were all in. It was like the shiny object that all they wanted all their outreach to be AI. AI this, AI that. And absolutely AI has a place. I use it every day. My team uses it every day. But people don't buy relationships via AI. People, and this is an old marketing sales thing. People buy from people, not companies. No one buys from Ally Marketing Systems. People buy from me because I've established a certain level of trust before they say, yeah, I'm going to trust you. I'm going to trust your process. Let's do this. They're not buying because I have a clever name or a website that's pretty, or, it's ironic that I don't have a business book under my own name, but, they don't buy because I've written these books. They buy because they know, like, and trust me. That never goes away, especially in my line of work. And so that's the thing that I think a lot of entrepreneurs are afraid of, because that means you have to be vulnerable. More and more people want less polished videos, for example, less polished comments, less polished posts, because we're so inundated with perfection and AI and smooth and polished that it takes that kind of vulnerability away and that connection away. And so when you show up as you, like sometimes one of my team members commented today on something I just posted. She's like, "Oh, your hair looks really combed there. Sometimes your hair's not so combed when you do a video." I'm like, "Well, that's me. Like sometimes my hair is not super combed. You get what you get." But that way, when people meet with me to talk with me to see if I can help them, they recognize me, because I don't, no filters. This is who I am. This is what I look like. This is how I talk. And that's how I try to connect with people as well. So I think people are kind of afraid of that fragility and kind of exposing themselves, but they shouldn't be, because I think that's when they can really shine and draw in the people that are just going to lift them up, whether it's clients, prospects, team members, strategic partners. When you're vulnerable and honest and you are yourself, you attract amazing people in your life. And I'm really lucky about that.
Absolutely. I mean, that's probably the reason why we are on the call today. I mean, it just took like connecting with you and the work that you're doing online, and really wanted to hear what's that all about. And at least thank you so much for at least combing your hair today, because then I don't know what we would have expected, you
I,
know?
I ran my fingers through my hair before I got on the camera. Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. And you see, I feel like it's a lot of fear that people undergo, because when you're supposed to show up as yourself, there's no precedent. There's no five-step process to become Alisa. There's no five-step process to become Prosper. You literally have to show up, and people want to make sure that they're not making a mistake and they're doing the right thing. Now, obviously, that's a lot of authenticity and transparency that happens for a lot of people, and so many people can't keep up with that. That's why they burn out and maybe stop showing up, because they can't keep up with the person that they think people think they should show up as. And guess what, the internet moves on. It just rewards whoever is there, and you might burn out today and people might not even remember you existed yesterday. So I strongly believe people should create something that, when they've created it, people will miss it when they're gone. You've been around the traps, you've discovered all of this, written all the books that showcase this. How does someone stay authentic while they're still trying to grow and stand out online?
I think that is really doing a deep dive into your why. And I know that sounds like a cliche, but one of the books that I wrote for a guy, actually he was based in Australia as well. He said, ask what your why is and write it down, and then ask yourself why again, and then ask what your why is again, and go at least 4 layers deep. And I really resonated with that, because it's too easy to say, my why is my family, or my why is my peace of mind, but really to dig deep in there. And when we do that, you find your voice, you find what you stand for, you find your perspective on things. Unless you do that work, you do end up sounding like everybody else. I saw a post recently on LinkedIn. I'm pretty sure I commented on it. Either I commented on it just in my head, or I actually wrote it down. But and it was about how so many people do the same thing on LinkedIn, for example. Motivational quotes. Like, how many more motivational quotes can we read, Prosper? Like, like, okay, I get it. How many more, oh, this is what I learned in my journey stories can we hear that sound like everybody else? And that's not to diminish those stories. It's just the perspective isn't there, the vulnerability isn't there, or it feels manufactured. And so as you're going through this and finding your voice and finding your perspective, I think it really goes into having those conversations with yourself. Like, why really am I doing this? This is not easy work. Like, just this morning, I was like, gosh, this is tough work, doing great work for our clients, always making sure that I've got a full pipeline, making sure I'm supporting my team, making sure that we've got the systems so that the team feels like they can take a week off and things won't fall apart. That takes a long time to get there. But the journey to get there, I think, is being really honest with yourself and not being afraid to be vulnerable and taking that deep look, have a perspective, have a point of view, and speak up. And don't be afraid to sound different. The more different you sound, the more interesting you are. That's what's going to stop people from scrolling.
Lisa, when I was growing up, we were always told, I mean, it is an actual statement in our culture, and I've only just started noticing it now that I have an understanding of what marketing really is. A teacher or an elder would put out their hand like this, all right, and then they would say that no two fingers on the same hand are of the same height, and each and every one of the fingers as a duty. If you didn't have this one, then you wouldn't be able to grip and do anything else, even though it's the smallest, but it's actually one of the strongest fingers that you actually have. And I'm going to be saying this without much love and respect. Maybe you might have lost your fingers, or somebody might have, or whatever it is. But if you really look at your hand, you will notice that each of the fingers has a different height, has a different use case, and they are unique and different in its own way to create a hand. So if we all try to be the same thing, we are all just going to be thumbs on a finger, and I don't think that's helpful.
Yeah.
I mean, you can give somebody 5 thumbs up, but I don't think that's how it's supposed to be. So, and one of the things that I've also noticed is, with what you are saying, marketing is just helping other people understand what it is that you do and what you stand for in a way that you feel comfortable saying it over and over again to somebody who's hearing it for the very first time. And I feel like if only people would understand that, none of this would be as difficult as it is. But you often work with business owners who really, really love what they do, but they hate marketing themselves. From what you're saying, why do you think so many brilliant people struggle to communicate their value?
Well, I think people start businesses for a multitude of reasons, and it's not usually so I can do marketing or so I can do bookkeeping. They there's certain things that you start a business for a passion, and very often you end up spending most of your time not doing that. You have to take care of business. You have to make sure you've got your bookkeeping in order. You have to make sure you've got everything compliant. You have to make sure, you've got legal protections if you need. You have to make sure you've got, insurance protections if you need. And you have to market. And a lot of people think they can do it themselves, and to a degree they can. There's a lot that you can do on your own. And in fact, I've built a community for people who are like solopreneurs. Like, they don't have the money to hire me. They don't have the money to hire an agency to run ads or do this or do that. But in the community, we've built it so that they can go in there and learn how to do that. Like, I teach how to do this. You can't take the teacher out of me. I put classes together of like, here's how you can really show up in LinkedIn. Hey, here's how you can build an outreach system yourself. And I'm going to coach you through it. And we've got group calls and we've got one-on-one calls. So there are ways to do it yourself. Absolutely. But like, I'm terrible with bookkeeping. I'm terrible at it. Could I do it myself? Absolutely. But I hate it and I'm terrible at it. And I fuss about it, and it took me years to finally, like, maybe I should hire a bookkeeper. I don't know. I think it's really important in business and in life to tap into your superpowers. Like I said, 80% of your time as a founder or a CEO or a business owner should be that tapping into your superpowers. Why did you get into this? You got into this to help entrepreneurs get into the right conversation, not let me make sure my checkbook is balanced. Let me make sure I hire marketing companies, Prosper. Like I hire people to do marketing because I don't have time for that. My job is building the systems and building the programs and making sure clients are happy and getting into communication. So you got to spend the time doing why you got into business in the first place. If you're not doing that 80% of the time, just start making moves to do that. You have to be working on the really, like you said, it's a cliche, but it's working on the business, not working in the business. If you're completing tasks every day that you could easily train someone or show someone how to do, then you're not spending your time wisely and you're getting distracted. And maybe that's our fear. Maybe there's a fear of being found out, that kind of, what do they call it? Imposter syndrome.
Imposter syndrome, yeah.
You
Mm.
know, maybe that's covering it up a little bit.
What I'm
That's
hearing here, and especially with that last remark on imposter syndrome, I think you actually just don't help businesses to market better, right? You actually help people feel safe enough to be seen, because I think a lot of people, it's a lot of fear. Like you said, the imposter syndrome comes in and it just holds them, stops them on their tracks. Now, if somebody's looking or watching this or listening to this, and maybe they're thinking, maybe I need to find out a little bit more about how Alisa can help me, where can they go on the internet, Alisa, so they can find out more about your work?
definitely on LinkedIn. So on LinkedIn, it's linkedin.com/IN/Alisa Cook, all one word. Pretty active there. And my website is Ally Marketing Systems, ALLY, marketingsystems.com. And that tells you pretty much of what we do, introduces people to our team and some of our main types of work. And I love just getting emails from people. I love hopping on calls. So you can email me too at alisa@allymarketingsystems.com.
Absolutely. And I will make sure that all those links are in the show notes so that people can actually find their way to your internet properties there. And while you're talking, I was just thinking to myself, a lot of people that come into marketing via different avenues, they might have pivoted where they came from, but they still carry that with them, as opposed to people that learned marketing from a YouTube video and then they think they're now a marketer. Because what I noticed about your journey is you're an educator before you became a marketer, right? And honestly, you just never stopped being a teacher. You simply changed the classrooms that you were delivering that information on, and if you really look at every bit of thing that happens with marketing, it's always about educating other people. Even if you look at SEO, even if you look at SEO in and of itself, if you
Yeah,
strip that
absolutely.
acronym from search engine optimization and replace it with educating people, it is simply educating others. You're educating people on who you are, what it is that you do, why you, why now, and why should anybody care. And I feel like you literally have that unique positioning besides the books and everything else that comes along with it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And you can't forget about my sailing skills too, or lack of sailing skills.
Yeah, those are a little bit questionable because from what I've heard, you can't set sail. I mean, you,
I
you're doing
can't,
all right,
but
at least.
I know my limitations, right? I have a great respect for the ocean, so it's like, ah. But
Yeah.
I was telling you earlier that right now I'm actually on my boat in Long Beach, California, and not that long ago we had to move from one slip to another slip, and we decided we had to move on a very windy, very high current day, and we backed the boat out, and normally you just back it out and you pull out, no problem. But this time we backed the boat out and it just started to spin in the opposite direction. It started to spin towards the land. And I'm like, oh my God. So we go in, we pull it in and try it again. And it does the same thing. And I'm like, you know what? We just have to pivot. The boat just started to pivot on its own and we made our way out of the lane. And that's the metaphor, right? Like in business, sometimes you think you're doing the right thing, you're saying the right thing. I've done everything. LinkedIn doesn't work, marketing doesn't work, cold emails don't work. Well, that's because you got to pivot your thinking about that a little bit. And the big pivot in this case is being vulnerable, being human, being who you are, showing up so people can know, like, and trust you because people buy from people, not businesses.
Absolutely. I mean, we had started off really, really well. I mean, your life story and your experience in education had so much relevance in how you're educating people. But when you started talking about your bookkeeping and your sailing, I just thought you are.
Related.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And having the last name as Cook, I mean, the Cook name is synonymous with good sailors that literally discovered half of
That's
Polynesia.
right.
And
That's right. That's right. I always wonder, I'm like, I got to be related to Captain Cook somehow, somewhere back there. I mean, come
there,
on.
there you go. There you go. So, I mean, obviously, this is really, really good. And what I really took from this is it's not necessarily, even if you've written a book, you expect the book to do all the heavy lifting, or you've got a website or a podcast out there. You got to go out there and connect with people and really, really show people who you are, what it is that you do. Now, if somebody's watching this right now and obviously they may be overwhelmed, what could be the first step that they could just take, with their marketing in order for them to actually start seeing the freedom that you've been talking about?
I think one of the things that the most common mistake I see people making in their marketing is trying to explain what they do. So they'll send out a very long email that explains what they do, and this is we do this and this and this and this, or they'll send a pitch on LinkedIn, or they're just trying to push what they do, what their business. I would take a look at that, and if you're being honest with yourself and you're finding that, yeah, that's kind of what I do, take a step back and just introduce yourself, just connect, just get into conversations. Because out of those conversations become introductions. Sometimes a conversation becomes a client. Sometimes a conversation becomes a strategic partner. And so stop trying to market yourself, but start trying to connect with people. Connect with the people that you want to spend time with, not necessarily as a client, but people who are going to lift you up, and start making those connections and having those conversations. Stop trying to market your business. Just introduce yourself.
Absolutely. And obviously, you've personified that, you being on the show today, and obviously showing us and helping us understand a little bit about your journey, and not even hiding, all the parts that some people would have been hiding just because it doesn't look good on camera, like your
Like
whole.
my hair.
Absolutely. Now, Alisa, obviously, you've taken us on a journey from the hallways of education to the internet hallways. I'm not gonna trust you with the ocean hallways. I mean, from what I've heard, we might just be left stranded on an island somewhere, and then yeah, I think that's what happened, and you just name it. Oh yeah, this is Cook
Yeah,
Island.
yeah. I meant to come to the island. Don't worry, I have life jackets on board. You're good. You're safe. And a good, strong radio for when I need help.
Absolutely, absolutely. But what's next? What are you working on right now that we can be excited about now that you brought us into your world?
What I'm working on is going back to that community. I really want to build up that community because that is my natural zone of teaching, educating, supporting. So I want to build that community, and I'm inviting entrepreneurs to join me on that and really make it kind of a it's not just learn how to do LinkedIn or learn how to market yourself. Like we can help each other grow our businesses. And that's the whole point of that community. So that's what I'm spending a lot of time on is inviting people into that community, developing the courses, and basically creating a safe place where people who sometimes feel overwhelmed can vent and feel like they're supported and get some answers and get some ideas.
Absolutely. And Alisa, I must say this. You've helped put a language into what a lot of people are confusing out there, because right now, if somebody would have clicked on this episode, they would have thought, oh, I'm going to get all the email marketing systems. I'm going to learn how to write a book. I'm going to know what SEO is about. I'm going to know all the tips and tricks of how to show up on LinkedIn. But all we did was just show up as human beings that are having a conversation and somewhat getting to know each other in, you know, in a public forum. And I
And
feel
that's the best kind of marketing. That's
And
the
I
best
feel
kind
like a
of
lot of people would have been left confused, say, where am I going to learn about marketing? And I think if nobody was paying attention, they didn't actually notice what was happening there. Thank you
Yeah.
so
Thank you so much for having me. It's really been a joy.
Absolutely. Now, for those that are watching, thank you too for having come all this way. And I know you know this was an incredible conversation. And to be honest, this is what marketing is all about. I reached out to Alisa and I said, hey, you come and share your stories with me. And all I knew was the goat story, the sailing story, but little did I know there was a whole other world behind her. So thank you so much, Alisa, for being vulnerable with me today on the Online Prosperity Show, and also showcasing to people that you don't necessarily need to market your books, your websites, or your logos. All you just need to do is show up to the right kind of people with the right kind of pain, and they will choose you to work with them simply because they think they know you, they like you, and they trust who you are.
Exactly. Nailed it.
Absolutely. So obviously today's episode wasn't just about marketing. It was about connection and about learning that, you know, people don't just buy because they fully understand your business, but they buy because they fully understand that they are understood by you. So if this conversation reminded you that business is still deeply human, I encourage you to share this episode with somebody who is actually struggling to grow without losing themselves in the process. And if you got value from today's discussion, I also encourage you to check out Alisa's business community. And I will be putting the links in the show notes there so that people can actually be a part of that. And it's the Ali Success Community. Those links will be in the show notes there. All right. And I can't wait to see what you will do with this information, or what you will do with this particular episode yourself. In the meantime, keep showing up to the right kind of people who have the right kind of pain that you know you can help, and keep creating information and content that people will miss you when you're no longer around to disseminate that information. And until next time, bye for now.